And we're recording.
Awesome. Wonderful. Let me pull up the agenda real quickly. But as I'm doing that, we would be calling to order the July 12th virtual meeting, special session of the Budget Advisory Committee to discuss the capital projects report. Starting with attendance on this virtual meeting, Josh Newell is present.
Min Q John present.
Bill Lesage present.
Peter Eckel present.
Stephen Ward present.
Rita Russell present.
Sean Lewis present.
Awesome. And do we have somebody not on video that's out in as well?
Yes, I believe that's Tim Dodd.
Right. And sorry, Suzanne, did I hear you? Awesome. Perfect. Well, with that, we've got everyone. First item of business is motion to approve the June 28th minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
A motion to approve.
Second. Anybody to second that?
Yep.
Suzanne, I think your volume's not coming through, at least on my end. Is anyone else hearing her?
Yeah, I can't hear you. I saw your mouth move, but I couldn't hear you.
Well, she did second it through. Is that okay, Jenny?
Yes.
Perfect. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Awesome. So those are approved. So tonight's working session is to discuss the annual report. So with the annual report, our goal is to really come away with the sections we want to cover and present to council. Thank you for all those that have sent emails last week to Jenny to get some of those ideas to start the process. We will decide on which sections we're going to cover, who wants to write each section. Peter, understand you're going to have some challenges having more fun over in Europe next week and for the rest of the month. So enjoy that. Thank you for your feedback today. James did send us a message that he is interested in being able to help out, but he's up in the Pacific Northwest and wasn't able to join us tonight. So we'll get all that assigned and then be able to start to work on it. Goal with all of us having our drafts ready by the next meeting, which I want to say is the 26th. And at the 26th, we'll be able to finalize that report and get it turned into council shortly after to meet their deadlines. Any questions, any thoughts on what that plan is? Awesome. Jenny, are you able to pull up the agenda with the topics that we had previously sent over?
Yes. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Do I need to make it larger?
I can see it.
I got it. All right. So, all right. So topics that have been sent over, and we'll kind of go one by one. If this was your topic or you have any strong opinions about it, please speak up. We can decide kind of as we're walking through if we want to include it, not include it, and find out if there's any missing topics that we do want to include. In the past, there's been anywhere from 3 to 5 major kind of conversation points, depending on what we really want to share with city, as well as the chances that, as Suzanne mentioned, I think to really talk about some of the things that we've really appreciate the hard work of all of council members, all of the City of Inglewood employees, and call out some of their successes over the last year. Things like the great operations of the train, I think, was an awesome kind of flower out of some of the COVID challenges, and knowing that so many people had such great experiences there, just driven by the sheer revenue that they saw last year. So different thoughts like that. So kind of moving through that, recruitment and retention. We heard about this, I think, from every single department. Anybody kind of keen on this one? Any thoughts on whether to include? I think we obviously need to include some comments on it. What are your guys' thoughts on how we want to approach that? And is anybody really keen on quarterbacking that section?
Yeah, I think
I'm
this
happy
is
to work
one
on that.
I can work with you, Peter, on this, because I think, like what you're saying, Josh, like every department is struggling with this one, not just City of Inglewood, but every company too. So I think this is something that we need to hit on.
All right. Where's our conversation, and what are we kind of discussing and recommending to council on this challenge? Is it a throw of dollars at the challenge? Is it, pay people more, focus on benefits? How do we want to think about approaching this?
I mean, my thought from a committee perspective is, and I know, and city manager could probably speak to it, but the thing that hit home with me was not being up to scale from a pay perspective. It sounded like there were some improvements made since our initial meetings to help with that. But that's the one that really hit home, and certainly beyond, below, it sounded like, other neighboring cities or cities within, Denver Metro. So that, I don't know, I think that at least that needs to be called out. Obviously, funding is an issue there, but I think that's definitely a point that needs to be made.
So I fully agree with that, Bill. I mean, it is a challenge of just being able to prioritize new dollars to fixing that, right sizing the pay shift, as well as being able to set the good point moving forward. Obviously, with the turnover in HR and from last year's presentation with HR compared to this year's, HR has been kind of at a deficit, it seems, for a couple of years now, and that's such a huge integral part of thinking about recruitment and retention beyond just a pay aspect. I just don't know if we know, or they know yet, how best to request or what the challenges that they can solve as they're trying to restaff HR. So I think generally supporting, benefit discussions, especially ancillary benefits, quality of life things. I just saw an article that having a solid IT system actually helps with retention, because when employees get really frustrated with the computers keep breaking and difficult on the IT, that actually drives some of them away, and that's a part of employee happiness. So even thinking from that aspect of how we can help, since it's not as, if it was only as easy as assigning more dollars to the task, we've got to be a little bit creative with how we approach it. And so just some thoughts from me on that front. Awesome. So we'll look forward to that section. Looks like we've got recruitment and retention listed a couple of times. The capital project process. This is something I'm really interested in providing some feedback on. Anybody else interested in working with me on it?
I'll do it, Josh.
Awesome. And I'll open it up to other people for any thoughts they want to share and things to be included as we're talking about feedback on the capital project. This is not necessarily any of the decisions made during it, but I think because this was our first year being involved in the capital project process, we gained a lot of insight on how we managed it, things we did well. I think scheduling wise, we learned a lot, but also how we can talk about ways that we feel we could better advise on capital projects next year if we had small changes around the process. So any feedback or thoughts on that?
I think those are good points, and this is my first round here, but I think that we did a good job in having an open discussion and then putting together numbers based on that. So, yeah, Josh, I'll be happy to help you on this one.
Rock on. Yeah, my initial thoughts is like overall, especially the communication, bringing everyone together for that single special meeting where all departments heard the same message, or all committees heard the same message, versus having each department go out one by one to help on the capital projects communication. I think that was really strong. I think the biggest challenges was understanding cost of completion and kind of next year's capital project budget and how those things really tie in together, and hearing the feedback from how Public Works approaches these with identifying projects, programs, and studies, kind of bringing some of that structure to the capital project process. I think that might really help out. So, all right. Investment in community outreach and engagement.
I know this is one that I brought up, so I don't know if there's agreement from my fellow members if this is something we want to touch on. If we do, I don't mind helping take lead on this one, but I'd like to know that this is something based on the list that we want to cover.
Yeah, I think this is one of those that a lot of departments ask for, like BAC's help or like spreading word of mouth. So I do agree that it should be a topic if you want to spearhead that, and then I could also help and chime in on this one too.
Okay. Yeah, I think I might reach out to Madeline too, see if I can get some time with her. And Minkyu, I can, clue you that, just maybe grab 15, 20 minutes, a half hour with her. I know it's not just her in the neighborhood side, but obviously she handles a lot of that. So.
Well, I think this is one area to highlight where I personally see a lot of effort and positive impact from the city, from the door hangers on when the concrete work is coming to the street sweeping. Like the fact that I know when I get home, it's right at my door. I don't have to check a website. So there's important messages coming to us from the information shared on both Instagram and Facebook and the social media, and all the way down to the community events, even the hard but responsible decision on not having the fireworks, but also being able to share the reasons behind that. And I think the city's done a great job on that. When we definitely support continued investment in that messaging and improvements where they can find the opportunities and new paths where they can find them as well.
Yeah, and I remember I'd gone back through notes, and there was definitely talk of professional services. I think just being able to keep up with it, it seemed like one, being able to keep up with it, and then, obviously the cost, but from video to, printing and the cost going up there, I think are some of the things we could highlight there. And I don't know if there's creative ways internally to manage some of that, especially from our professional services perspective, to do anything in-house, or I don't know. Those are just some thoughts I kind of had off the top of my head.
Awesome.
Was there, I gone back through and I remember hearing, and maybe somebody remembers that there was a request for additional staff around managing some of the request for communications. Does anyone else recall that? I don't know if that's necessarily something we want to recommend or not, but might be part of the broader topic that, if you're going to support it more, obviously you have to have, somebody able to help manage the requests and keep track of them and status them. I'm gonna go back through the decks, but I had the note, but I don't remember who asked for that right now, so I have to go back through.
Well, and kind of jumping a couple of points ahead, is that tied to even the wider records management challenges, both inventory of all the way down to the concrete inventory where they're replacing it, but is there a records management system that would help facilitate that internal work for the services on marketing? Like I remember in some of my corporate days, the tool stack or the tech stack marketing used to be able to work stuff through the workflows and be more efficient with it. So it's not a person having to do it. It's something that can be a little bit more automated. And so I wonder if those tied together at all.
Yeah, it could be. One thing too I thought about on this, and maybe it's a bit far-fetched, so you could tell me. But from a professional services perspective, knowing I'm sure there's budgetary constraints there, is I thought about maybe even reaching out to like Wendy Rubin, and seeing like, is there a is there a partnership there with maybe the high school or middle schools of video classes or other things that they're doing that could be used. I don't know. But does that sound too far-fetched? Looking for opinions on that.
No, I love that idea, especially if there's programs in the schools and we can start to tap into that and those resources and even publicize that's where the information's coming from. I think that's a super rad idea and definitely outside the box. So.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know whether I'll hear back, but I'll reach out to her and see if that's something, that at least they would be willing to discuss, but with staff, in the future.
Mm-hmm. And if they have the, what was it, Future Business Leaders of America, any clubs like that, I think would be an easy tap in to have those conversations as well, to see how they can get involved and be a part of some of these, very much business processes when you're talking about communications and marketing and things like that. And so there'd be a lot of overlap.
Yeah, good point.
Awesome. All right. So better metrics tracking to calculate potential ROI on projects and investments. And this kind of goes through that cost of capital, cost of completion, and what we get for the investments. It's never an easy topic, especially when you look at a lot of the complexities, but is this something that we should tie into our other sections or have a standalone section on?
If it's the first year that which I guess all of this is maybe the first year in many regards that we introduced this, maybe we couple it with the capital project process at least, but I don't know people's opinion.
I'd be comfortable including that in capital projects because that would help us make the decisions on the capital projects. And I also think, it's one of those things that something like this will be a long-term phase-in approach versus something that can happen overnight, especially with calculating good ROI metrics and algorithms and whatnot.
Agreed.
All right, so Peter and I will include that. Fiber and other IT investments, and I put this on here. Does anyone have any thoughts on fiber or other IT?
I mean, it's something I'm pretty familiar with. I don't know much about this plan with the city, and I don't know what the group's general opinion was on doing this topic. Or maybe we're not. Do we select some of these still, or all these topics we need to represent?
No, we can decide what to include, what not to include. And so if this is not something that raises to the level of discussion, it's something it seems that the IT department asked for $1 million for the next 20 years to get it set up. And my fear is IT is just going to be with the competing priorities, especially when we get into a more normal budget cycle next year where there's not as much to allocate to capital projects, is how much is IT going to continue to not have enough invested in it, and what's the risk of obsolescence and headaches and lack of inefficiencies with challenges around IT. But I look at the fiber project as there's no way I could ever see us funding that out of a normal budget. That's the type of project that would need to have a standalone funding where here's how we would get the funding, here's how we'd implement it, and kind of a full cost of completion under that one project versus $1 million a year. And in 20 years, we hope it's going to work out. And so, are there any other major IT investments or upgrades that need to be happening, and is that something that should all be lumped together with the fiber project? And what could even the benefit of the fiber be if we were able to say, finance $25 million and now it's getting fiber to businesses and houses and having an impact for the community versus just tying in all the government buildings? And so that's one of those, like, to me, we need more of a study to go down that route. And I would call it out from the aspect of wanting to have a better study on what is our IT challenges, knowing that that was one of the areas that we had more conversation on the budget in terms of where we were trying to cut around the corners and what we need to do to prevent, bigger challenges around infrastructure, or IT infrastructure down the road.
I agree with you. I think it's a really, it's something we should definitely, at worst, put on the list for next year, at worst. And I think you could couple the other IT investments together. But I know the fiber in and of itself alone is certainly worthy of a report. But again, I would vote for next year. That's my opinion.
Next year on that. I think keeping that top of mind within the next couple of years is a good enough approach for me, unless anybody's feeling passionate about keeping it on for this year. All right. Jumping back, and I know I mentioned it a little bit with Bill's section, but records management system, and this sounds like another area that the city's moving in the right direction. They're getting a lot more record management. It sounds like it's evolved even in the last year, but we did have a lot of questions around legal compliance as well as regulatory compliance. And so I think, at least mentioning it in some aspect, that it's good to see the current prioritization, and that's something I do think important for the city to continue to keep top of mind. So I think even a short paragraph about that would be beneficial. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
All right. Sustainability, advocating for the 2023 bond. I think it's very important, is other than saying we support the bond and maybe even scoping it to a little bit wider of a conversation about, funding these larger projects and tying into kind of what Peter and I put together on the capital project process. What do you think we should include about, the Parks and Rec bond and the improvements to the Rec Center and Pirates Cove?
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Good. I dialed in. So that's my bullet point, and that's copy pasted directly from Christine Underhill's notes. So as far as what we can advocate for, aside from what's listed there, I'd like to look at the presentation again, but those were the three big things that she spoke to.
Now, can we even kind of looking at the community engagement and outreach, is this a part of that, community wellness, where engagement outreach, but also the places to go to, and do we tie it under that category, or is it something that you think, Suzanne, it needs its standalone category to be able to give its proper due to?
Say the last part again.
Do you think it's a high enough prioritization for you to have its own category, or is it something that can be under a different category and kind of combined with something?
In terms of our strategic plan outcomes?
In terms of writing it into the report.
Oh, I think it's separate than anything listed here. I think it's different than community outreach and engagement.
Okay. All right. Public work, so transportation and infrastructure, public works advocating for a grant writer. Suzanne, help me remember, because we talked about a grant writer last year as well. Did they hire a centralized grant writer, or is that still a gap, and is that something we want to bring back?
Can city staff speak to that?
Sure. We did not hire a grant writer. And as we've talked about this among the leadership team, I think a lot of departments are going for a lot of grants. And I think there's different directors have had, grant writers and organizations that are good at kind of watching out for grants, some that are good at writing grants, but the breadth of different grant sources is such that, one grant writer can't really be all knowing. That said, I definitely think that in certain departments it would be advantageous. So, I mean, we're not opposed to it being in the recommendations. Whether or not we can fund it is a different matter.
Well, and I think this is another opportunity to talk about if there is the opportunity to fund this, being able to put trackable ROI metrics on it, to say what are our grants before the grant writer, what are our grants afterwards, and we can now start to see, hey, maybe this position pays for itself time and a half, and that would prioritize more future budget allocation for additional grant writer support. And so I think this is one of those things that, if done with the proper ROI, could be really eye-opening to see, is it the best spend of money, and then look to say what's the best way to either pilot it where you've got a part-time, a full-time for a temporary position, and then vet it out to see if it is the right direction moving forward for having dedicated grant writers.
Yeah, I like that. And I like what Sean said about, you can't have a single grant writer represent the entire city, but you could have a grant writer represent several different departments, like public works, and maybe spanning into utilities or something similar.
And is any of the grant process centralized? Do we know if there's any duplicate? And this gets back to obviously a larger company, but when I was at retirement plan provider doing RFPs, we had the RFP writers that knew how to copy and paste sections to help fill it in, and now our sales team could go out and actually modify that document to be appropriate for the client that we're putting in front of it. And so is that even a possibility where, is there a lot of overlap between these grants where somebody can now come in and fill out the basic information, and then the subject matter experts have less work to do on the grant, rather than having that grant writer fully write every single grant where they might not have the expertise on
it? If that's a question for staff, I think that's a pretty good model, because you're exactly right. I mean, a grant writer can't be a subject matter expert in everything. In terms of kind of centralization, maybe that's what a grant writer could give us. We do have a requirement that all grants have to go to city council. So we do, certainly we're aware of what grants are, being received by the city. We don't have to go to council to apply for them, but there is kind of, from that standpoint that it goes to council, there's a central repository, and maybe Jenny or Jackie could speak to if there's other kind of grant tracking that is centralized. I'm not sure.
I think more on the financial reporting to the, the federal government on that side, it's more centralized in accounting, but we also work with the departments. So there's that outreach with them.
All right. Anybody want to cover the grant writer specifically for the report?
I'll speak to it. I added that bullet point, so I'm happy to own it. And just on the record, since I didn't have my mic set up before, I'm happy to speak to recruitment and retention and community outreach also. So do what you want with that. But I just wanted the opportunity to say that now that I'm dialed in.
Awesome.
All right. Safety.
Real quick, who else was on the recruitment and retention besides Suzanne?
Say it again.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I voiced that I would like to help out with that.
Okay, who was that? Sorry, I don't see a name on the screen.
It was MinQ.
MinQ.
Oh, thank you, Minkyu.
All right. Last section is safety, police, and we know that. Do we have a status of either the bond or the mill, the mill or the sales tax for either police or the alternative policing and the municipal programs? What's kind of the status on that right now? And that question's for city.
Yeah, I can answer that. So council has passed on first reading an ordinance to put 2 ballot measures on the ballot for November. One would be a 0.2 increase to our 3.5 sales tax for street repair, repaving, and maintenance. And then there would be a second question that would be a 0.1 increase or 1/10 of a penny to our 3.5% rate. That would be for public safety to provide a dedicated funding source for our alternative policing programs. So it's 2 questions. One's a 1/5 of a penny and one is a 1/10 of a penny.
And you said that's for the roads and then for alternative policing. The budget request for the police department for officers and the report writers, is that being addressed in these ballot measures?
Yes. So essentially what this does is it will allow us to take the money that we've already paid in the last several years to beef up alternate policing, which we really have had to because of the chronic homelessness issues, mental health issues, addiction issues, the services that we have, basically the additional traditional policing staffing that we've diverted to alternate policing. Once alternate policing has a dedicated funding source, then we can go back and keep that funding in the police department for more traditional uses. And so with the budget amendment that council did earlier this year for 1 desk officer and at least the desk officer and 1 officer that we can build into this year's budget, then I think the additional funding will fully fund the police department's requests.
That's a fantastic way to approach it, and especially since all sides would benefit from the alternative policing. Is there going to be messaging in the ballot measure about the knock-on impact to the traditional policing force and the benefits to them?
Yeah, we're working on that messaging right now, and we are considering ourselves, since council has done first reading, that we're in the kind of we have to comply with the Fair Campaign Act. I can't remember the exact name, and so we're developing that messaging now. But I'll I'll take your point that we need to make that part of the messaging.
So with that action happening, do we want to keep this section in the report and talk to our support or any other commentary towards it? Or do we want to remove it from the report so we can focus on other areas?
I guess ultimately, I just want to be sure that our department is fully staffed, whether it's a desk officer, alternative policing, patrol officers. And as a resident, I get concerned when I hear about patrol officers being understaffed on minimums, what have you. So when it comes to the police department, that's the issue that's on my mind.
And what's
as far as if you want to keep it in the
sorry, you cut out at the end there, but I think that I was going to ask, is this now a recruitment and retention conversation about it, or is this a increasing staffing of the police? Because I know we kind of had the challenges from both ends with them having some open positions, but also wanting to increase beyond that,
I think,
or needing to.
I don't think it falls under the category of recruitment and retention. I think the police department's separate of that, particularly because they're unionized.
All right, does anyone want to take this section then?
I can help do it. I will ask for somebody to help me.
You're going to be busy over there in Europe.
I know, and I already got 2 topics. I don't know. I'd ask somebody else.
Maybe James? Didn't you say Josh that James wanted to know?
Yeah, so James was interested in infrastructure, and outside the grant writer, we don't have any major infrastructure points on our initial list. I'm happy to work with James on this section. So that would give us, kind of running through it, we've got recruitment and retention, and I'm just going to list all this off as a full list of the notes I was taking, and then we'll discuss at the end. But recruitment and retention, we had Peter, Min-Q, and Suzanne. You're interested in this section. Capital process or projects process and ROI calculations, Peter and I. Community outreach and engagement, Bill and Min-Kyun and Susan. Records management. If anyone's feeling passionate about it and wants to jump on it, otherwise this one, based off of the rest of our list, I think we can probably remove. To me, it's the lowest priority of everything we're discussing. Any volunteers for it or additional votes to remove it? What are your guys' thoughts?
I recognize the importance of it. It does not light a fire in my belly to the point where I feel it needs to be included in the report. I wouldn't be opposed to including it, but I don't feel strongly about making sure it's in there.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I guess from a citizen perspective, you figure you assume or hope that you're following standards and regulations with record management. I mean, certainly we as a committee would support that, but
so I think it's kind of, we'll keep an eye on it, maybe for next year when we're talking about fiber and other IT projects in the next few years to see if there needs to be more conversation around that, but punch it for now. It's not quite to the level we want to include on this report. So we've got the Parks and Rec 2023 bond issuance. Suzanne, you said you're interested in that one. Anybody want to work on that as well? And that's something maybe James, we can see if he's interested in helping out. So we have 2 people in every section. Then moving on to grant writer. Anybody, Suzanne, you want that section as well? And anybody want to work on it?
Yeah, if you guys feel strongly about putting it in the report, I'll own that piece since I added that bullet point to the page. And if you guys don't feel strongly about it, that's okay too.
It's something I think we keep hearing year after year as well. Just pains around that process, and so kind of what we talked about, and thinking of some creative designs where if you have somebody to be an expert on all the basic questions and then work with the SMEs or different approaches like that, even piloting different approaches to see what's going to work best, as long as we tie in that ROI calculation to understand best we can the impact it's having. I think that might be with the ROI and kind of that making sure it's good spend of money, that's a great one to cover. So I do think that should be still included. All right, anybody to work with Suzanne on it?
I can help you with that one, Suzanne.
All right, and then please, we're going to see if James wants to work on it with me. So that gives us all sections. We'll confirm with James. Topics being recruitment and retention, capital process ROI, community outreach engagement, parks and rec bond issuance, grant writer, and police and safety. So that's 6 different topics we're covering. We had talked about tying everything to the strategic outcomes. Obviously, this list doesn't align perfectly with strategic outcomes. So with that, how do we want to approach everything on the strategic outcomes? Do we want to fill in gaps and be able to assign these to the different strategic outcomes and then just have small commentary for the outcomes that we're not having more conversations on? Or do we just want to say, kind of call out the strategic outcome on each of the topics that we do cover, but just drive it by the 6 topics that we think are the top priority to discuss? And so I'll kind of leave it open for discussion, thinking about the best way to present it tied to strategic outcomes.
I think we can do the latter of hitting on the topics and then hitting on the strategic outcomes and why we think it's important, instead of trying to fill the gaps. But that's just my opinion.
So if I understand correctly, that would be taking our topics, and if I heard Minkyu correctly, that would be saying, okay, given our opinion on this and some of the things that we should all consider, this fits into the strategic outcome via whatever the reasoning is. Is that correct? In terms of how we're going to align the conversation.
Yeah, correct. And because it's hard, because if we have a strategic outcome that we don't have, that we're not saying anything to, and now we have a header of that strategic outcome and it's more or less a blank section, do we want to do that or have it being the topics? And I do think, since it is a limited list, then we want to focus on topics that tie into the strategic outcome, leading with the topics and then talking about the tie-in. The other way to kind of address this is we can have, as a part of the opening section, just talk about our experience aligning our process with the strategic outcomes. And while we thought that was a really good way to review things, ultimately the report, we wanted to focus on the items we thought that were most important. And so the report won't reflect the strategic outcomes, but we do like the process that we had set up and reviewing the tie-ins of the departments to the strategic outcome and continue that for next year. So that'd be my thought, is to keep it based off of the topics, but talk about the strategic outcomes in the opening section, and kind of explain why we're not presenting and writing the report to the outcomes, but to the individual topics.
I like it.
All right, so opening. And anybody want to work on the kind of opening section and that setup?
I can try to help with that.
I like, go ahead, Suzanne.
If Bill writes the intro, I will write a handful of single sentence bullet points that fall under the category of accolades for the year.
That's fantastic. And anybody that wants to help out with that cool thing they've experienced in the city, go ahead and email those bullet points to Suzanne for collection. But having that accolade section will be absolutely fantastic and always a great way to show our appreciation for the hard work from council and the city staff. And then a closing section. All right, and we can think about the closing section maybe at the 26th meeting and get that wrapped up. I don't think, especially with the accolades already in there, I don't think we need quite as much for any closing unless anybody or as we go through the report writing, we have something strong we want to share in closing. We can just kind of recap some of our major points.
Is there a, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, is there a target length or word count or, I mean, you know, how in depth should we expect to write this?
Going off memory, reports average about 5 pages, of 15 minutes to read. At least
I
briefly.
think we're losing you, Suzanne.
Yeah, Suzanne, you're breaking up just a little bit. I lost you at, we typically it's around 5 pages is where we lost you. We still can't hear you, Suzanne. Maybe she took a phone call. I don't know.
Yeah. So last year, the report's been 5 pages or so, 4 to 6 pages, kind of. Oh, so looks like she just left the meeting. Yeah, phone issues on her end. But it's been about 5 pages in the past. When we present to the city, we've got about 15 minutes to go through our end of the presentation, and then some good dialogue, question and answers coming back and forth. So each of these sections, knowing that we've got about 6 sections, you're thinking, half a page to 3/4 of the page is fine. If you need the words, use the words. If you don't need the words, shorter is not going to offend anyone either.
Great, thanks.
Awesome.
Are there any? Sorry, Josh, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead, Bill.
From as we work together, are either you or Suzanne or Jenny may know rules on like saying, use an example. I draft up an intro and would like to get input from others on it. Or working with Minkyu and Suzanne on the communications. Is it okay to send back information back and forth? Or does that, when we get into, it could be declared a meeting?
It's my understanding if 3 or more than 2 people are meeting or discussing a topic, so even if it's an email or, like a phone call, that's considered an open meeting. It falls under the open meeting requests. So I think we have to be careful. What you could do is possibly send me a document and then I can forward it on, or if you guys are using Google Docs, I think somebody had set up, I think maybe Chelsea had set up a Google Docs document that people could just look at and make their comments to that document. I don't believe that conflicts with the open records law.
And I think if you can see if other people are in the document at the same time. So if there's ever 3 people in the document, one of them should jump out.
Right.
So what I'll do is I'll set up a Google Doc with kind of each of these sections and who's in charge of the section. So we all have that centralized. Share that link and we'll just be able to communicate. You can type in notes. We'll do the track changes so we can be able to communicate through there. All of the sections we had discussed had 2 people assigned to it, with the exception of Suzanne had expressed interest in recruitment and retention and the government outreach and engagement. Do we want to think about getting Peter Mincu, Suzanne on the recruitment and retention, Bill and Mincu with Suzanne on the community outreach and engagement? Do we want to get that down to 2 so people can get together and work, or are you guys comfortable just kind of managing that you can't have more than 2 of you discussing it at one time as you're working on that section? Drop it to 2. Suzanne, I know you picked up some other sections. Do you feel strongly about the 4 that you've got assigned to you right now? Peter, I think you've got 3 sections assigned to you. So Mincu, I think you've got 3 or 4 as well. So those with a lot of different sections. How do you feel about the recruitment and retention and the community outreach?
Yeah, I think that recruitment and retention, I can drop out of that one. If Bill and Suzanne, you guys want to work on it, but I'll just drop the 2. That's totally fine with me. Oh wait, sorry, that's Peter and Suzanne.
No, that's fine. No, I'll stay on the recruitment and retention with Suzanne. I'll stay on the capital project process with Josh, which I think will include the better metrics and tracking kind of that section. So that's 2 for me, but I'm willing to help out also.
Suzanne, how do you feel about community outreach and engagement? Do you want to stay on that one? Bill and Mincu are the other 2 on there. Yes, thumbs up, you want to stay, thumbs down, you want to get off of it. Across if you want to, you're fine either way. Bill, any strong feelings about that?
No, I mean, I think that was that and the opening are the ones I'm assigned. If someone would rather have me help out somewhere else, that's fine too.
Yeah, Suzanne, you've got a lot of other sections with the accolades, the Parks and Rec, and the grant writer. So maybe we'll keep Bill on it. And then all these sections, the people we're assigning are going to be the main people for writing the section. You can go and provide feedback on other sections. We do want to make this, you're not locked away from the other topics. And so you'll still get a chance to opine on it. Just do it in our comment section there. So community outreach is Bill McKeon. Parks and Rec bond issue is Suzanne and James. Grant writer, Suzanne and McHugh. And then the safety for police is James and Josh. Accolades is Suzanne, and anybody that wants to send single sentence bullet points, she will collect them and send it to her for inclusion. And then we will work together on the closing on the 26th. So Ideally, if we can target maybe next Wednesday to have your drafts done, that gives everyone a couple of days after that to review it before we get together on the 26th, 2 weeks from now. What are thoughts on that schedule?
Sounds good to me.
Works for me.
I will get a Google document created with everyone's name listed to the section tomorrow. Get that sent out. Jenny, I will copy you on that. Anyone else I need to copy from city?
I don't think so.
All right. And before we Councilmember Russell and Mayor Pro Tem Ward, would love your guys' feedback on anything you would like to hear from us that is not included in this list so far, to see if there's anything else we should be adding.
I think you guys have a great report planned. I look forward to seeing the final product.
And I agree with Mayor Pro Tem.
Perfect. If anything comes up, we'll use kind of the comment section of the document to share, or if we need to send an email, just make sure Jenny's copied on it and questions, and we'll figure out the best way to address them as well. Anything else to cover tonight? I think we move into Members' Choice next. All right. If there's nothing, thank you all for your time in this extra meeting and the work we'll be putting in over the next couple of weeks to get this ready. Jenny, can you remind us the date that this gets delivered to council and when we'd be discussing it with council and presenting in front of them?
We're planning to present on August 1st with City Council. So as soon as we finish our meeting on the 26th, we'll get that included in the council packet for that Wednesday, the 27th.
Perfect. And what we'll do is try and be very, very efficient during the 26th because we'll discuss the approach we want to take to presenting this to council and build out a strategy. So the more work we do with the drafts and providing feedback between now and the 26th will help that meeting be a lot more efficient. And then hopefully we can avoid having to schedule a second meeting that week to finalize the presentation. All right. If there's nothing else, that will be it for tonight, inside of an hour. So that's a great, efficient meeting tonight. Awesome.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate all you're doing and looking forward to seeing the report we put in front of council this year.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.